I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships,
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
Hello.
Every time, I guess.
You keep talking about us coming up with something different. Hey, I think last time I threw something weird out. I don't remember.
That's not different.
I guess.
If you say so.
Listen, all I know is that we better be laughing in 41 years like the old couple we met last night.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. Should have invited them on
super
here.
Funny.
Just have some like old couple on the podcast. And so we met an old couple that was married for 41 years, and they were still laughing and joking and flirting and being playful with each other. We're at a band concert for one of the kids, and they were doing this like the entire time. So like, it wasn't just like a one-off thing. Like, they enjoyed having fun. And we've talked about that before on the podcast and what that should look like, but
yeah,
that's going to be us in like 40 years.
Yeah, I said it better be. It was super cute though. I couldn't stop smiling and laughing at them. But like, they got up to leave and she walked past us as they were leaving and she was like, I pinched his butt and he thought it was my mom. It was so funny. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cute.
Anyways, so what are we talking about?
I don't know. What are we talking about? You have the notes over there.
I do, actually. I wanted to actually talk about this. We went to church today and we had a really great sermon. I'm sure a lot of the women enjoyed it. And we've recently been in this series at our church about men. It says, Men, We Need You. And it was a lot of basically how men are supposed to be men from a biblical perspective. It's been like a month-long series, I believe, that we've been going about this. But there are some really good points. And I think it would be important to talk about this stuff, but also add in some things. And essentially, a lot of what this one was talking about was like sexual immorality. And, the pastor made some really good points. And it started with, talking about kind of the four main things that men tend to focus on in their lives, right? Which is money, influence, power, and sex. And he went on to explain these things and talking about how these things affect our lives. And one thing that I really love that he said is that we shove things into our lives because we don't know what we want. And that really stuck out to me, right? Because we see it so much inside of relationships, right? And we see it when couples don't know what they want out of themselves, which then leads to them not knowing what they want out of a relationship. And then they basically are just stuck in a pattern because they're lonely, right? And then they start shoving all these things into their life, right? Kids and kids' activities and, extracurricular activities and this club and that club and this and that. And, the pastor had brought up, it's so interesting because you see this situation and after 18 years, the kids are gone. And now the people don't know what to do. They don't know who they are. They don't know who their spouse even is, right?
Yeah.
And I think this becomes such a problem for us because how often do we see that in relationships, right? And it was like this couple, they've been married for 41 years. And the thing is they were still laughing, still joking, still flirting with each other, right? And how often do we see relationships in which we forget those things? We forget, why did we get together in the first place, right? Why did we basically choose to marry this person?
Yeah.
And we go down this path of like, well, they're just in our lives, so we're not lonely. But then we fill our lives with so many other things. And what's really interesting about this is that starts to transition into other desires, right? And the pastor made this statement that a desire becomes an idol when you're willing to sin to attain it. And we started, there was this connection made about men. Basically, if we go back to the not knowing what we want, or I would go so far as to say not know who we are, or we forget who we are, we use these sexual things to plug into holes within ourselves, right? And so, he had talked about when you see, or like for men, when we get frustrated, when we get angry, when we, do these things, that's when we seek sexual immorality. And, he talked a lot about pornography. It also is the attention seeking of other, somebody of the opposite sex. It can be the lustful things on, like he talked about, liking the Instagram models, right? And what's so interesting about that is when you get back to the basis of it, and what I would say the missing piece, in my opinion, or the sprinkles on top to the sermon, would have been the identity piece, right? Because when we lose our identity in that, what tends to happen is something will occur, like he said, right? The rejection by a girl, or the fight with our spouse, or somebody pissing us off at work, or whatever these things are. And then we go and seek a dopamine hit, or to fill that hole because we're angry. Right? And what's so interesting about that is then we choose to fill that with some sort of sexual idol. And it got me thinking, right, of how often we see this with so many like relationships, and the destruction that it creates, where people are searching to fill a void, right? Because they don't know who they are. They don't know who their spouse is. And they don't know their identity within their relationship. And what happens is we start seeking this validation, this satisfaction, this dopamine through these other channels, right? Through these other means. And it's interesting because, seeing what we've seen now, going through the things that we've experienced in our past, in our relationship and previous, marriages, all this sort of stuff, there's a direct tie, I would say, towards a man knowing who he is and knowing who his spouse is, and the things that he seeks behind closed doors. And I see this where, we're given this identity almost of like, there's books out there like the centerfold syndrome, which I read years ago now. And they talk about these things of like the subconscious programming that you see in society and the way we're programmed to basically chase lust from the very beginning. And what's so interesting about that is seeing the work of the enemy in this and seeing the things, right? The way that the enemy gets in there, because I we had talked about, or the pastor had brought up First Corinthians today, and a part in there where Paul is talking about it and how the sexual immorality is a sin that destroys the flesh, basically, right?
Yeah.
And it was this like different view of how it's the only sin that's noted as destroying the flesh. And what's so interesting about that to me is that you start realizing that it's this subconscious programming that continues to happen throughout our lives. But when we take on this identity of these things are normal, right? And this is just part of life, what tends to happen is we introduce it into our relationship, into our marriage, right? And even, like even you and I, when we were first together, it was like there was things that we talked about, and it was like, oh, like, porn doesn't really bother me and this and that. And like it wasn't really something I was into anyways, but it was like we had these discussions, right? And looking back on it, it's like the enemy finds so many ways to try to twist that. And when a man isn't firm in who he is and where his faith lies and who his spouse is, and more importantly, I guess I should say, who his spouse is to him, it's so easy for us to get caught up in these things where, well, this one time I'll just pull out my phone and do this. Or you get wrapped up in the Instagram models, or the ex girlfriend from high school that happens to pop up on your Instagram or your Facebook or whatever the case may be, right? And we start going down this rabbit hole, and it starts training your brain in this way that you may not even realize it. Or when you're out and about, and you are checking girls out in the grocery store or doing this or doing that or in the gym. And then, maybe you have a dream, right? And it could be about a woman you've never seen before. So it seems harmless, right? Because, well, I've never seen her before. It doesn't matter. But the problem is those little things are eating you away and creating this disconnection that's pushing your spouse further and further away, right? And when you continue to do these things, it creates this wedge that gets bigger and bigger in the relationship. We always talk about how every interaction is basically a opportunity for connection or disconnection. And I would say that sex inside of your marriage or inside your relationship is one of these areas, right? And the choices you're actively making, right? We've noticed a direct connection between our sex life and how we sleep, in the sense that if we go, say, 3 or 4 or 5 days or a week without being intimate, we aren't close to each other when we're sleeping. We're sleeping at opposite sides of the bed. We're waking, and not even intentionally, right? Like we might fall asleep, with my arm around you and us, cuddling or spooning or whatever you want to call it. And then we wake up multiple times throughout the night. And then we notice that we're having these weird dreams and this and that. And it's so interesting to me that, like, how many people see that as normal? right? How many people are just like, oh yeah, I don't want to be close to my partner when I'm sleeping, or they're just too hot to sleep next to her. Yeah, I don't like to be touched when I'm right. And we've talked about why, like, that is, especially from a woman's perspective, if like she's saying these things, why that is the case, right?
Yeah.
But like, when you think about it, how often do people let those things, right? They don't think about this stuff. And, the sex, oh, well, we have sex a couple times a month, and that's fine. We're just, we've had kids, or we're busy, or we're older now, or whatever crap excuse, right? You want to give. And then there's all these other little things where he's checking out the girls at the gym or at the grocery store, or seeing the things on the social media feeds, and this and that, and you start to realize how massive the disconnection becomes in those times, and you can see it clearly from the outside and how disconnected two parties become in that.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to do, and we've had this conversation recently. I even had this conversation with a friend recently. Well, first I'll say, like, it is funny because when we are connected, like, and having sex more frequently, the amount that I wake up during the middle of the night, like, significantly decreases.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed last night, like, we went to bed and I didn't wake up until 9 this morning, which never happens. Like, I almost always toss or turn several times throughout the night that I can remember. And that didn't happen last night. But anyways, that's a side note. But we've had a conversation recently, and like I said, I had it with a friend as well. Like, I have seen things about how when you're married, one of the biggest places that the enemy uses against you is your sex life. And if you think about it, like, that was designed by God to be a connection point for you and your spouse, right? It was designed to, bring life into the world, but it was also designed as a way to show love between a husband and a wife,
Yeah.
right? So if you can get in between that and cause separation and disconnect from your spouse, and then suddenly there's, disconnection in your relationship, which then leads to, maybe a little more arguing in your relationship and just not sleeping well. And like all these little things that you don't even realize, like, stems from the fact that you're not really, being intimate in your relationship anymore. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because I made the connection that, like, truly before we got married, like, that wasn't really an issue. It wasn't somewhere that was ever really, like, attacked in our relationship, right? Like, there were other things that would be attacked here or there, but mostly it was, like, personal things with us, right?
Yeah.
But that was never an issue
Till we got married.
until we got married. And as soon as we got married, it started being something that, like, became a little more distant here or there, and then we'd have times where we're like a week out from having sex and we're like, this is kind of an issue, and that was, like, legitimately not something that was ever an issue
Yeah.
before we got married.
Yeah. I was just thinking about it. I made two connections while you were talking about that. Is one, how often do you hear that crap? Right? Oh, well, it changes when you get married.
Mm-hmm.
Does it?
I mean, it doesn't, but it does, because suddenly
Right.
you're in a covenant.
Right. And you're going to be attacked. Right. And if the enemy can divide you, that's one way he's going to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I was just thinking about, because we haven't explicitly said this. Now, we've said it, and we talk about internal conversations all the time. And I would hope that people could connect the dots, but we haven't explicitly said this in the sense that right there, oh, it's different when you have kids, or when you're married.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just, we have kids, right? We talk about internal conversations all the time, but yet we're going to sit here and tell ourselves this. Oh,
Yeah.
and especially I would say that you hear it more on the women's side than men, right? But the men actually, no, let me rephrase that. Because I would say that it happens just as much, but it's different, right? And this negative self-talk, right? And it's so funny because even people that understand this internal conversation and the conversation, how drastic that can alter your life, will still do this, right? In the sense of, yeah, my wife XYZ, my wife doesn't do so very often. Oh, I wish, we could be like this. Oh, this, yeah, we're just not like that. Right. Or like women, oh yeah, I just don't want to be touched. Yeah, I just, you know,
Yeah.
my this or that, the kids or the menopause or and I don't want to take anything away from the fact that does change, right? But how much more is it that society has normalized this division, and now we start telling ourselves this and we start programming this into ourselves, right? Because we're having these conversations, right? And even like you had mentioned, we started being attacked after we got married.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so interesting because how often do people change the conversation, change the narrative, and then assume this other identity, right? Oh, we're married now, so it's just not going to be, right? And the funny thing is, when you look at that, having sex and doing all the things before you're married is a sin.
Yeah.
And you wonder why it's not attacked. You
Yeah,
wonder
because
why
it's a
it
sin
changed.
outside.
Right. And so think about it this
So
way,
he doesn't
right?
need to attack that.
Right. Why would he?
Yeah.
Why would it? And we live in such this worldly view of like, oh, well, yeah, it's just so fun when you're dating and this and that. We do all the things and all the crazy stuff, right? And then when you get married, oh, well, you're just married now. It's different, right? And you hear all the jokes about like, oh, the blowjob stop when you get married, or the sex stops when you get married, or all this, or when you have kids, right?
Yeah.
Does it? Or is that the narrative you're telling yourself? Does it? Or is that the enemy attacking you and he wasn't going to mess with you when you were sinning? When you're
Right.
actively engaging in this worldly sin, why would he interrupt that?
Right. You're doing what he wants you to do.
Right. But then you have a covenant now.
Yeah.
And you're married now. Well, whoa. Now, right?
Now it goes against him.
Right. Because it creates marital unity.
Right.
The pastor said today, marital unity, procreation, and expression of love.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we have to interrupt that because, if we can create division, then we keep you from being who you need to be. Then we keep you away from the identity of it's no longer I who lives, but he who lives in me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It really is. Like, I don't think people understand the depth of that right there. Is that, like, it's a sin outside of marriage, so why would he attack it? But the minute you get married and you start living in a covenant, like, now it is actually something that he can attack and drive a wedge between. Right? And really, that's when you start sinning in other ways, like watching porn or lusting over other people or whatever, right? Because I got to create that division somewhere. So let's lead you somewhere else. But you know what I was thinking that I also think is interesting is like, they've come out with like people who have these like 100 days of sex thing, you know, whatever, with your spouse to like encourage you to be more intimate. Have you ever met someone who's done that and been like, oh, I hated that. That really sucked.
Mm-hmm.
I did not enjoy having sex with my spouse that much. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like you will never meet someone who has like actually done that and like put effort into it and was like, oh, that was the worst.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy that. Because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be having that connection with your spouse. But we get so caught up in the worldly things, caught up in the enemy trying to divide us, that like that's not a thought that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not only that, it's funny because we talk about this on the podcast though, right? Of like, we say this before. If she's not doing the things that you want in the bedroom, then you need to look yourself in the mirror and figure out where you're failing, right? Or because we talk about how, you know, when a man is leading, when he is handling his stuff, when he is stepping up and being a man that he's called to be, that's not an issue. And so if you think about it, when the man, because he is supposed to lead, veers off, right, of who he's supposed to be, and then she stops being attracted to him, she stops wanting to do those things, how do you think the enemy attacks? It's not you get married and then he flips a switch and says, oh, well, no more sex, right? Because I'm gonna attack this. He starts by attacking the identity of the man, breaking that down to build or to break the attraction. And then we come up with all these excuses. Well, I had kids. Well, this, well, that, well, we're busy.
Yeah.
You know, and it breaks down the connection and the unity inside of that covenant that God created. How often do you see, like we said, where people are just making these things normal and normalizing this, right? We always want to point fingers at the breakdown in the relationship. But I guarantee you that if a pastor stood in the front of the church in the pulpit and said, hey, men, you need to start getting your crap together. You need to start doing what you're supposed to. Start leading your family properly. Because, by the way, the enemy is breaking connection between you guys and keeping you away from sex. And by the way, you guys are listening to the worldly things and running these scripts and programs and telling yourself this garbage nonstop. And by the way, you're supposed to be having sex regularly because not only is it from God, it's part of how you create unity and connection in your relationship. The church would lose their mind. Right? It all sounds good when the pastor's saying, hey, men, you need to stand up and be men. And the women want to elbow their husbands or look at their husbands or say some stuff, right? But what about the other side of that, right? Because let's talk about 1 Corinthians and talking about your body not belonging to yourself on the man and the woman side. Right?
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about, hey, the enemy's going to attack you and you're going to make all these excuses.
You're not supposed to deprive each other unless you're in a season of prayer. So unless you be praying a lot.
Yeah. That had me cracking up today with the pastor talking about, some of you men talking about my wife prays an awful lot. And it was funny, but at the end of the day, like, think about that, right? It's
but
all
also,
great.
like, he had the whole church like raise their hand about, you know, if you've ever had lustful thought, like there was a whole thing
A whole
about it,
list,
but like basically it had to do with lustful thinking more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And every single person in the church raised their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because that's the easiest way in our society, really,
Mm-hmm.
to attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's such an easy way. And
Yeah.
especially with stuff just being so easily available these days. And like you said, like we both came into our relationship being like, it's, not that big of a deal. But also, we had come from relationships where we were having to make those internal conversations that, oh, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal. Like we weren't acknowledging where the problem actually was and what was happening.
Yeah. But that's what we talk about, right? We want to use the Bible when it's convenient. We want to use hey, we know we need to change our internal conversation when it's convenient.
Mm-hmm.
No, if you're going to be a follower of the faith, no, if you're going to change your life, it's in all areas, right? You don't get to pick and choose.
Yeah.
Right? Men don't get to pick and choose when we want to step up. We don't get to pick and choose, hey, I'm going to have a better internal conversation about, my fitness or my business or how I even look at myself, but then we're not going to change it with our wife.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to change it with our kids. No, we don't get to pick and choose. You change your internal conversation, and don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you have to flip a switch, because at the end of the day, trying to flip a switch and do everything in your life all at once is one of the ways that people don't stick to things, right? You
Yeah.
do have to start somewhere. And because you're listening to this podcast and it is about relationships, that's a great place to start, right?
Yeah.
But you don't get to pick and choose. That means when your relationship internal conversation is rock solid, you move on to your kids, you move on to your business, you move on to your health, whatever it is, you change those conversations, right? And the same thing goes for women. You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to say, hey, when the pastor says, yeah, man, you need to do this. You need to protect your wife. You need to, we're supposed to be protectors of women. And he made all the analogies about, everywhere Jesus went, women felt empowered. They felt safe. They felt, all of these things. And okay, we're supposed to be more Christ-like. And this is how we should be making women feel and blah, blah, blah. You don't get to elbow your husband there. But then you're not having sex with him, but once a week or every 2 weeks or whatever, because, well, I'm busy or kids or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think it's a two-way street for sure, that you both have to be making the effort in.
And you both need to be changing your internal conversations and not,
For sure.
saying the
But
same
also, like,
things.
sorry,
You're good.
in that, like, I think that when your internal conversations start changing, because you talk about men leading, like, that's going to create more of that emotional safety that women really, like, I don't want to say require, but kind of require for sex, Like, we can just have sex to have sex, but, like, it's not really ever what women want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like when a woman is doing that, there's other things,
Mm-hmm.
It's a validation, or, you know, underlying issues like you talked about earlier, the things that you're not bringing to the surface. But if you're wanting healthy sex inside of your relationship, it does require that, like, emotional safety piece.
Yeah.
But when you start changing your internal conversation and then she just feels safer in your presence, then she's going to want to start doing those things naturally. It's like it's about like, this is how the world works. But I would say, like, it still needs to be an effort that's made. Like when we talked about that, like 100 days of sex every day type of thing, like oftentimes that's something people do because they get in such a bad spot. They're like, well, I don't know what to do. Maybe we should do this to try and fix it. And magically, it does make things better because, oh, you're both working towards something. You're both working actively to try and create a better scenario. And then in the process, you both start enjoying it. You both start realizing that you have more connection. Why do you have more connection? Because you're actually being intimate with each other. You're doing what you were created to do inside of your marriage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rabbit holes there, but
it comes back to the internal conversations and the identity.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? What are you telling yourself? We talk about that all the time, but like I said, you can't pick and choose. You don't pick and choose when it's convenient. You don't pick and choose when you're going to follow the Bible, right? Oh, I'm going to follow it on my way to work because I gave somebody more grace, or, I'm going to follow it because I tell my partner that we need to go to church on a Sunday. Right. But then you bring up that First Corinthians about your body not belonging to yourself. Oh, whoa. Right.
Yeah. I think though, like going back to, having all these outside desires and lustful things, whether that be looking at porn or, like you said, just checking women out in the grocery store, liking Instagram models. And like it does go for women too. Just don't talk about it as much. But women are just as bad about checking out all the men in the grocery store, or, checking out the men in the gym, whatever. Like it really does go both ways. But, I made this like, oh, it all makes sense moment the other night when, we were at our Friday night Shabbat group, and our friend brought up about how like he quit chewing tobacco. Like someone said something to him one time and then he decided to do it and like just was able to quit that day. But it was along the lines of like he had a can of tobacco and would carry it unopened because he decided that it doesn't control him, he controls it. And that really like is the conversation that you have to start having with yourself about all of these things. Does porn control you, or do you control it? Does looking lustfully at other women or men, does that control you, or do you control it? Because we're the ones that control it. We're the ones that choose whether we do it or not.
Yeah.
So are you going to let yourself choose the sinful side, or are you going to choose to be in control of it?
Well, and that's the thing is like, there's a level of commitment you have to make to getting yourself out of those scenarios, right? Those scenarios being, we talked about all the automotive pages, that I followed for years. And then all of a sudden recently, the last 6 months, start seeing more and more of them pop up when they're posting, instead of whatever their normal content is. Well, now it's a Jeep with a half naked woman in front of it, or a truck with a half naked woman, and unfollowing that, right? Maybe you don't have that level of self-control. So maybe you need to get off social media, in general. And people argue that, well, unless it's actively making you money, do you really need it?
Does it control you or do you control it?
Right. And we make these excuses to not step away from something, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a friend that, does photography. Instagram is part of that because they're constantly posting photography stuff on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Okay. But the flip side to that is if you struggle with this, maybe you don't go on to Instagram on your phone, right? There's other ways, right? We post content on our social medias all the time, but with a level of self-control. Like I said, stuff pops up. Okay, cool. Unfollow, right? Doesn't matter how resourceful the page is. Doesn't matter. You start posting that. Cool. Unfollow. There is a level though, like of how do you take yourself out of it? Right? Well, if you're unless you set up a gym in your house, which is great if you have the space and the money to set it up, absolutely. Set up a home gym, work out at home, right? Better yet, you can lose weight and be fit without even a bunch of equipment, right?
Yeah.
But if part of your health journey is going to a physical gym, the day and age we live in, people are going to wear crazy stuff at the gym. Like you said, does it control you or do you control it, right? If something passes your eyes, doesn't mean you have to keep engaging.
Yeah.
You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to keep doing what you're doing. You can choose to be so locked in the gym that you're unaware, really, of your surroundings.
That's usually how I am. But you tell me I'm that way with everything. So.
Yeah, that's different. But, right, that there's a level of this that you have to understand that you control it or it's going to control you.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a level of this that you just have to make different choices and remove yourself from it.
Yeah.
Right? Removing yourself from the situation. And if you can't do that, and you can't have discernment enough to unfollow the social media pages, right? Unfollow the women on your social media pages. Undo, right? Think about this. For the longest time, I didn't even have, I still don't have certain family members that are women because they post inappropriate stuff on social media, right? Those are family members. There's no excuses, right? And so the thing about it is you have to have that discernment. And if you can't, then remove yourself.
Yeah.
Do you really need Instagram? Is it making you money? Right?
Probably not for most people.
Do you really need TikTok? Is it making you money?
Yeah.
Do you really need Facebook? Trust me, I love Facebook Marketplace as much as the next guy. But if you can't have the discernment to decipher what you're watching or what comes across, right?
I do think that's a little bit harder for men too. Like Pastor brought up the point today, like just you creating an account and clicking that you're male suddenly makes your algorithm like all,
Mm-hmm.
things that are going to be creating that lustful side. Because I feel like I don't have that issue at all on my social media.
Yeah.
But my social media is all, pastor sermons from churches or these like Christian quotes or sourdough or like it's all like stuff that I've created, but it's all good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have that issue of like having to worry that I'm gonna scroll across a half naked woman or I guess maybe that's a thing with guys. I don't know, but I haven't really seen that. So
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a level of it too, right? Of like the algorithm learns and it's going to try and keep you addicted. But yes, I mean, that is a thing where, a guy posts something and he puts, whatever he puts on his when he sets up the account, and now all of a sudden, that's what the algorithm says. Oh, you're a guy, and it's going to post all this stuff that tries to keep you sucked in.
Right, but is it gonna control you, or are you going to control it?
Well, exactly. And the other side of it is that you have to have that discernment, right? We talked about that. If you can't, then you should probably remove yourself.
Yeah.
Anyways, on that note, I think we went on a pretty good rant talking about this stuff. And,
yeah.
It was a little slower to start, but I think that there needed to be some context there. So we always leave them with something to do for the week. The question is, what is that thing?
I don't know. Do you want to tell them about our new school page?
Yeah, we can, for sure. About going to school.
SKOOL, not the normal school.
Well, I'm gonna give them 2 actions then. So,
Okay.
1, we did create a school community, SKOOL. If you are not familiar with school, I highly encourage you. Speaking of social media, it is a much healthier place to be. It's built on communities online. There's also education parts of it. When you are building a school community, you have the opportunity to either build it and have it everything for free. You can offer different tiers for different things that are paid subscriptions. You can do it however you want, right? But the key here is that people are able to create communities. Think Facebook groups with an educational course side as well, or class side, or live events, kind of all wrapped up into one. We created one for Covenant Chronicles. It is called Covenant Community. You will see the Covenant Chronicles logo on there. That's how you know it is us. Go join it. It is full of valuable information. There's all kinds of posts, weekly posts, random posts, education. Highly encourage you to go watch it, to join it and actively engage. Additionally, there is tiers. There is a free side that is open to everybody just by simply creating a school account, which is free to do. And then you can join our community. It is free. There's also paid tiers depending on what you are after. But as of right now, there is a whole year-long Bible study specifically for couples, marriages, and specifically related to that in the free community. There's also some other resources in there in the free side of things that is invaluable and will massively change your relationship if you so choose to use it. So I highly encourage you to go join the school community and Covenant community and go check those things out. That being said, the other thing I am going to tell you to do is this week, whether you are male or female, husband or wife, you are going to start changing your conversation, internal conversation around sex with your spouse. If you are trapped in any of these situations, you are a man and you have been telling yourself this crap about, I never get, my wife never, she doesn't do any of that crap, you are going to change that. I love my wife. My wife is awesome. She loves to do things in the bedroom for me. Even if it is not a current event, you are talking about what you are producing in your life. If you're a woman and you are saying this garbage about, oh, I don't like him touching me, I have a headache, Things are just different after kids. Things are just different after whatever insert X life event. You're going to throw that out. And your new internal conversation is, I love being intimate with my husband. When me and my husband are intimate, I feel so connected with him. Once again, guys, I understand that this may not be where you are currently setting. Throw out this issue you have where you feel like a liar or you feel like you're not being congruent because that is not your current reality. We have to create what we want in our lives. And we do this by changing our internal conversations and changing our identity. Okay. The men's group that I help to co-lead, we have a theme and a saying, and we have it on little bracelets. It says, I'm loyal to my king and I'm faithful to my wife. Even the men who are not married yet, even the men who are single, practice this because it is about becoming a great husband even before you are a husband, right? If you want to be intimate with your partner and enjoy it again and love it and have that relationship where you feel these things, you have to create it. And when you start telling yourself this, you start having these conversations and you slowly start to believe these things, you will actually create the reality that you are seeking. So there you go. There's the two things for you to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Also, I'm not totally sure that the school photo is the podcast logo. I think I might have changed it the other day to be our new animated
That's the like the display or background or whatever you want to call it. The actual like
to find it
icon,
is
the actual icon, or like think of it like if people are familiar with Instagram or sorry, with Facebook, you can have your like actual profile picture and then you can have that like background picture on your profile.
yeah.
So that like background picture is the animated version of us climbing the mountain holding hands. And then the actual profile little icon is still the Covenant Chronicles picture.
I just want to make that distinction because I wasn't sure. I was like, they're going to go looking for it and it might not be there. All right. Well, there you have it. You guys have an amazing week. And we shall talk to you next time.
All righty. Bye.
Okay, bye.